Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mana on the Rocks. It is I, the Joester. Joining me this week, not only my co-host, but what is this? The subject of today's local brew. It's Atlas, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, everybody.
All right, as I alluded to, Atlas, we are breaking down your Kenrith deck, and we get into some really good conversation. We get to cover a lot of the theory that we built up over the years, and get to explain a lot of the thought process, and just have a grand old time breaking down good old King Control. But what I really need you to break down for me is these announcements. What do the people got to know?
Well, I think we're pretty square on announcements for this week. We're just going to reiterate the couple things that we've been harping on for the past little bit. We have on November 4th, which is coming up much closer than you think it is, the Gabby's Olympic Cards and Comics next major event, which is the Olympic Commander Challenger Series, Season 2, Volume 4. They do it like books or something like that. So it's a fun little thing. But it's the fourth one this year. It's going to be their last quarterly event. It's the last chance to win the limited edition colored Dockside Extortionist playmat that me and a couple of other people have. So go ahead and sign up for that. It's November 4th. It'll be an all-day thing. It's going to be a really great event, though, because for the first time ever, they're allowing 10 proxies. Just make sure they're on cardstock. They're not going to accept a piece of paper in front of a card. So as long as it's on cardstock, you should be fine. Proxies from NPC are always going to be great. That'll obviously work. But I know there's going to be some great competition there because local players, and then there are also a couple of players traveling down from Bellingham. There's a player from Auburn who's interested in going. All very, very good players who are going to provide some stiff competition. So check it out. We might even get some people from Portland to come up. Hopefully, fingers crossed. We'd love to see our PDX brethren show up for this event. It's going to be a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And then after that, it's November 18th and 19th. Speaking of PDX, it is their regional championship for the Pacific Northwest Circuit. That's going to be a 2-day event. It's going to be the largest one in the Pacific Northwest in a fat minute with a 100-player cap. That's going to be hosted in Graham, Washington, at courtesy of Next Level Gaming. So sign up for that. You're not going to want to miss it. It's going to be the first one. What I'm sure will be happening for several years. So go ahead and sign up. It's going to be a lot of really good competition. That is going to be a 100% proxy legal event. So go ahead and just print off whatever deck you think you're best with, and then make sure that you show up because we would love to see you there. But after that, I think things are quieting down for the year. It's not really a whole lot to go on. We just had the Doctor Who release, so maybe we'll talk about that in a future episode here or something. But I have nothing else.
Well, I got something else. We got to shout out the lucky patron for the week. Shout out to Meowzarita. Thank you very much for the support. We appreciate you. So without further ado, let's get into this local brew and get a drink. Kenny, big K, Kung Fu Kenny, the comeback kid, the guy who sits on the throne. It is time. It is time. I think this one. I'm excited to take a bit of a deep dive into your Kenrith list because it is so. I don't know. I look at this list and I see a lot of good cards, just like on surface. Like every single one of these cards reads as like just stock standard in the formats, right?
Sure.
And then we start getting to some of the weirder cards, some of the weirdo tech. Like we're on Niv Mizzet, we're on Displacer Kitten, like we're on Cloud Shift. We've kind of talked like in passing on the podcast about this, but let's take it from the top. Let's take it from the high level. What does your Kenrith list do?
Everything. No, not really. It's the basic premise for the list is I am, at my heart and soul, I'm a control player. I don't like going for fast wins because they get blown out easy and then you're stuck. I don't like playing stacks because I think it's really easy for your opponents to misplay around stacks, even if it's really good when all of your opponents are playing super correctly. I also think that it stacks makes you the boogeyman, and I really don't like ad nauseam. So I decided I was going to play a deck that doesn't use ad nause, didn't do any of those things. I was going to try and forge something that played to my strengths as a control player. And specifically, when I'm playing control, I really like the idea of draw-go control, which, for those who are not familiar, is the counterpoint to the other control archetype from 60-card formats called tap-out control. This is an old idea from like modern a couple years back, maybe like a little more than half a decade ago. Maybe no, I lied. It's like a decade ago at this point. Is when the term started popping up.
Probably because you're tapping out for cryptic command.
Yes. Yeah, and that is more or less that's more or less where the terms came from. Is so the idea of tap out control, we'll start there, is at its is like the most basic form of control. It's a control list that is trying to play really high quality bomby cards. It's like more akin to the classic definition of mid-range, where you're playing some more like early control pieces, and then you're pivoting into these bombs that will just like handle the opponent all on their own. Like, it puts them on a clock, it keeps them under like their resources under control, stops them from taking game actions. Because 1-for-1ing is really important in 1v1 Magic. Like, I'm gonna cast my duress on you, you're gonna discard your best card that I select, and now you are down a card and I'm down a card, but my card only costs 1 mana and your card was your entire game.
Not only that, like, especially with those circumstances, you gain information.
Yes, you know exactly what you're playing around. So those 1v1ing or 1-for-1ing is very important, and tap out control lists do that very, very well. They 1-for-1 you in the early game, and they place these bombs that end up 1, 2, 3-for-1ing you later as they put you on a clock, and or just handle every threat that you try to establish yourself. It's sort of like the inverse of what tempo is in 60-card formats, where you're sticking an early threat, and then you're just going to ride that threat to victory and play control magic over the top of it, 1-for-1ing your opponents the rest of the way. But this one little thing is going to carry you. Think something similar to modern days Delver, which is like, I'm going to slap a Ragavan down early, and I'm just going to beat you up with this Ragavan. It's going to make me mana, pseudo draw me cards, because if your card's really good, I'm going to play it. And then I'm going to counter your spells, and then eventually I'll develop another threat, just when I have time. But in the meanwhile, I'm just poking you with this 2/2, which is just constantly like putting pressure on you. That's what tempo is.
What a world we live in when we talk about Delver, and we talk about and like the go-to creature for that archetype is Ragavan, not even the namesake anymore.
No, it's not, which is really funny.
It really isn't, but that's aside. Yeah, because I think once you hang around the CDH space enough, you start to hear the mantra of, oh, control doesn't work. Like, you can't control 3 other opponents. Like, you only have 100 cards versus 300 cards. Like, you have to be essentially 3-for-1ing every exchange if you want to like maintain any sort of profitability with the team.
And that is super, super true. Classic control does not work. If you're trying to play mono blue, like what's his name? The wizard that's like reduces your spells or whatever. Baral. You're trying to play like mono blue Baral counterspell control in CEDH. It's not going to be a bad time. Very successful.
You are just not going to have a good time.
No, you have no card advantage of command zone. That cost reduction means almost nothing when your opponents are ramping out to 7 mana on turn 4 and casting bomb spells that you have to answer, but like you're spending 1 counter spell for every bomb your opponent is dropping, and your opponents are dropping 3 bombs in a single turn. You go from 7 cards to 4 cards very quickly, and you're only drawing 1 card per turn. Heaven forbid they pop your Rhystic Study. Now you're down 2 cards just automatically. So yeah, it's really tough to play classically imagined control in a 4-player format. But that brings us back to this idea of draw-go control, right? So classic control, like I said, 2 archetypes: tap out, which we already covered, it's the inverse of tempo, and then draw-go, which is this idea of I'm going to draw and then play a land and say go. And so more or less, the idea behind draw-go is that you're going to draw and say go, your opponent will take a game action, and you will counterspell or in some meaningful way interact with to hinder that game action. And then you're going to move to your turn and take a game action that's meaningful or that they cannot interact with because they're down all of the resources in the late game. Or in the early game, you're just going to continue to say, draw, go, draw, go, draw, go. And you're going to accumulate resources, being mana, being lands, and cards along the way, but you're going to do it on your opponent's turn, both for card advantage and for like depleting their resources. That way, that if they have any interaction, they have to use it on their turn, where it's going to tap them out so that you can successfully and safely profit on your turn. Really classic examples of this would be like Cryptic Command. Cryptic Command is a huge example of the draw-go playstyle from like Old Modern, where you would draw, you play your island for turn, you pass. They take a game action, you unsubstantiate it or whatever, like you bounce it. You draw for turn, you play a land, you pass. They take a game action, you counterspell it. You draw, you play a land, you pass. They take a game action, maybe you can answer it, maybe you can't, but you're gonna cast a Think Twice on their end step. So now you're up an extra card. You're gonna draw go to your turn, you're gonna draw, play your fourth land, pass. They're gonna try and do something. You're gonna Cryptic Command them, which now puts you up a card, so you're card neutral, and you've bounced like their land to time walk them, you've removed a threat, you've countered a spell they cast. It taps their team, does so much. Draw-go does in some cases end up tapping out on its turn, because sometimes the optimal control play is to just say, well, I guess spending 4 mana to Supreme Verdict you is just better than Cryptic Commanding at this point. And most of your threats are sorcery speed, so you'll have to develop them. But another really good example of a threat for Old Modern decks would be like Aetherly, if anyone remembers that card. It's a 6 mana 4/5 for blue and 4. That it was a shapeshifter creature, I think. But the important part of that card is that it has 4 activated abilities similar to the other Ling cards. There's pay a blue, it gains unblockable. Pay a blue, exile it until the beginning of the next end step. Pay a generic, gets +1/-1, or pay a generic, it gets -1/+1. So you can adjust its stats really flexibly to make it a really, really aggressive attacker that cannot be blocked, or a phenomenal blocker that basically cannot be beat and might even end up eating your guy. And on top of all of that, your sweepers, Supreme Verdict, it doesn't die to those because you're paying 1 blue at your opponent's end step, and then you're going to your turn, casting your uncounterable Verdict, wiping the field, and your Aetherlink's going to come back. Summoning 6, sure, but it's going to sit there and block for you really good until your next turn when it can swing. So that's an idea of draw-go threats.
So how are we translating that into the CDH game of Magic?
And there lied the challenge. So I started this deck. My idea was, I'm not sure that Control is really viable because everyone said Control's not viable. And but what if, like, I know there are tempo decks. I played Najeela for a while. Najeela can be classified as a tempo deck to some extent if you're playing it that way.
I would call it.
If you're playing like the NBC version, it's not. It's just like another generic turbo mode strategy. But if you're playing like a Najeela centric strategy, you can definitely be seen as a tempo list. Yuriko is a tempo deck. I think you could even, in some regards, consider like Winota a tempo deck. There are some Paco and Halden. That's another really good example of a tempo deck. You're sticking an early threat, and you're gonna play control. Paco, and you're gonna play control for the rest of the game. So my initial thought behind the strategy was, well, that seems really doable. Kenrith does a lot. It's a threat. We can stick it early by ramping into it like J-Lo, Mana Vault, Grim Monolith, things like that. So early versions of the deck, it was called Kenrith. It was called Kenrith Tempo, or something along those lines. And the early versions of the deck saw a game plan that focused on ramping up an early Kenrith, developing a lot of mana and resources, using things like Biomancer's Familiar, Smothering Tithe, effects like that. Because it didn't have to be Kenrith. Other effects like an early Smothering Tithe, or maybe like, I'm trying to think of some of the other cards I was playing that I'm not now. That none are coming to mind, but effects like that.
I can't remember any of them either.
But other effects like that would generate you advantage really early in the game, and you just have to defend them, and they'll basically just carry you through. They might not single-handedly win you the game, but they'll carry you through the plays that do win you the game. So that was an idea, and I built that, and I played that, and it was pretty successful. But it wasn't world-breaking. It was like a solid take. I was on Thoracle at that point too, even though I wasn't playing Ad Nauseam, because it's a very compact, like efficient win condition. And then the list really took a turn towards like the more control-oriented aspect when Displacer Kitten got spoiled. Because like that card got spoiled, and I immediately fell in love with it. I just thought that it did everything I wanted a card to do. Now that Paradox Engine was banned, it allowed you to reuse resources such as Mana Vault, Mana Crypt. You can re-trigger ETBs like Dockside Extortionist. I was like, oh, this is really good. I immediately figured out combos with Spellseeker and Luris, just like the same time that the rest of the community was figuring them out. Somebody posted about 3 Fairy, and I was like, that's an interesting combo. But of course, for those of you who follow the pod, you know that I do not like that card. So I wasn't big onto playing. But there were loops with like Luris and Lotus Petal. There were loops with Spellseeker, doing the Cantuna line that I developed in order to get your Thassa's Oracle into play and Consult for like basically 4 mana. So there was that. I was also at this point still on like Skirk Prospector, because it comboed with Dockside Extortionist, and I was very Dockside combo heavy. So on Skirk, I was on I think I might have even been on MEL back in those days.
You might have. I don't remember ever seeing you putting a meal on the bed. You might have. I cannot remember a time when you were on Emil, to be quite honest. I might be very,
I don't remember.
Wrong,
I'll have to go back and see the receipts, but in Moxfield. Yeah. But anyways, so that initiated a change to the list that pushed it more like ETB centric and like reusing these really, really strong effects. And so initially, I don't think I was even on Eternal.
Yeah, I don't think you were. I think I had to like try and convince you to get on it.
Yeah, I think I was off it at first, and then after talking with you, we were like, oh, this card's really good. It acts like a second copy of Luris. And so added that, tested it, really liked it, found some cool stuff to do with Dark Ritual and Cabal Ritual, because like I said, we're still pretty heavy into the Red Kenrith.
Yep, we were still on double Ritual plans.
Yep. And so the deck was still pretty much like play on your turn, win on your turn. Like obviously Kenrith just generically enabled its speed wins, but that was not like a primary idea of the deck. And then a lot of reps, things change. Cards get spoiled, specifically like Saw in Half was a big one, and I was like, oh, that card's really cool. I should figure out a way to like make that work. Maybe I can play like Dualcaster Mage and Saw, because that means that if my Thoracle plan gets biffed, I can Saw my Thoracle a bunch of times and just create Infinite Devotion and win that way. And about this time, I was also like working with some other people, and they were like, why are you playing like Demonic Consultation and a couple of other cards? Like they're like, these cards suck. And I was like, yeah, they feel terrible to draw, but they make my Thoracle really good. And then they were like, okay, well, try cutting Consult for this card. So list goes through more changes. List decides to start abusing Displacer Kitten more and more, because Eternal Witness and Spellseeker have been super, super successful. There's been, at this point, like no reason for me to want to be back on Console. I've really liked not playing with Console. I just get Tainted Pact instead. It's a lot safer. Even if it's a little bit slower, but we're on a lot of like counter spells, a lot of control magic, so it's not that big a deal. Deck develops even further. I remember there was a specific day where I put a Thoracle into play, and I was literally just casting it because I wanted to do the Scry 2 effect, and everyone freaked out, and I was like, guys, look at my mana. Like it's turn 2. I have blue. That's the only mana I have. I'm casting a Thoracle. And they're like, oh, that's a good point. They let it resolve, trigger resolves. I scry some cards at the bottom. Didn't use Thoracle to end up winning that game, and I was like, why am I even on this card? I have not won a game with this card in 3 months. And so I always just opt for something else because it's safer and it's better. So at that point I cut Thoracle, found slots for other cards. List developed even more. I realized I was on Razaketh for a little while to abuse Dockside loops because it's sack outlet, because I decided I didn't like Skirk. It's a Reanimator bomb, tutors up whatever I need. Very cool. Eventually decided didn't like that card. Was working on another list with somebody else. We were trying to revive Curiosity Control. There had just been some content video that was published, and they'd seen it, and they were like, oh, this is really cool. I like the idea of Curious Control. And so we were flipping through their list, and they were like, I was telling them like, oh, Mayhem Devil seems really good with your Curiosity effects. You can slap it on there and it pings more stuff. And they're like, oh, it's a really good idea. And so I was looking through their list, and I saw Niv Mizzet, and I was like, wow, Niv Mizzet's a really good card, and it exhibits board control, plus it's a draw engine, which is a reanimator draw engine that I was looking for. So I decided to just slot that in raw, no curiosity effects. First game I resolved it, card overperformed. It drew me like 14 cards in a turn after people were battling on the stack, and I immediately untapped the game. So that locked that card slot, and ever since, like, some games it doesn't do anything, other games it just runs the table, because the card is pretty game warping. Very game warping. Especially if your opponents are playing super optimized decks that play a lot of instants and sorceries to tutor or interact. The deck just punishes that so hard. Or not the deck, but the card, Niv Mizzet, punishes that style of play so very, very hard. At some point while I was on Eternal Witness, I had realized that I could develop a loop with this other card that I was playing, which was Cloud Shift, which I really liked because it interacted favorably with Gilded Drake. And I can Cloud Shift my Eternal Witness, getting a Displacer Kitten trigger, and that'll still pick up my Cloud Shift because of the way the state-based actions resolve. And then I was like, oh, well, this just goes infinite with a Dockside count of 2. So that makes me feel better about cutting Razaketh. And then ever since then, it's just been minor tweaks, because the rest of the core has remained the same. It was basically the pivot to hard, like, draw go, I would say, was when the moment I realized that silence effects are really good, and silence effects occur naturally when someone wins the game. When someone wins the game, no player has any interaction that matters, and therefore the game is over. I would call that, in my opinion, a silence, because no player can interact. So I was like, wow, what if we figure out a way to abuse that? Displacer Kitten's really good at that, because your creatures can enter the battlefield at instant speed, as long as you have an instant. Kenrith puts creatures into play at instant speed. Entomb is a busted card. And even if they've died, he just brings them back. So we decided to try out that style of play, where you don't really win on your turn unless you really need to, or unless you have a Grand Abolisher in play to protect. And that has just been so immensely successful, because you're able to sit back and watch everyone burn their counterspells, and then be like, okay guys, silence. And they counter that, that's the last counterspell, and you say, okay, great, I'll just win the game for free. Or sometimes someone else casts a silence, everyone burns all their stuff, or Thoracle trigger goes on the stack after someone consults their library, and you say, does anyone have any interaction? And everyone goes, no, I'm F6. And you say, great. In response to your Thoracle trigger, I'll do this game action, this game action, this game action, just by casting instants or activating abilities. That'll cause some triggers, and I'll just go win the game here. And it's been super, super successful.
Yeah, I feel like super successful, like, even saying that feels almost like an understatement. Like, your reign on the Pacific Northwest is, I'd say, legendary to me at this point.
I wouldn't go that far.
No, I'm using hyperbole. This is the adjective that I'm using. No, it's been insane, because you would tell me, like, oh, I'm going to this event. I'm like, okay, cool, have fun. And then, like, I'd hear, like, guys, I won again. I'm like, Jesus, or I made the final table again. Like, you were consistently every week going to a new event in a new crowd and just cleaning house. Like, no one was prepared for, like, this style of gameplay. That combined with the most silver-laden tongue in the game. Like, you get to literally just walk up and do whatever you want. And I'm gonna be a little snooty. It's unfair. No, I jest. Obviously, I jest. Like, because it's a very different style of deck building, and I think this episode's going to be structured a little bit differently, because like 95 of these cards are just generically good cards, and like there'll be some like incidental things that we can go over, like things like recent inclusion of Oko, your dork lineup changes, intuition, cloud shift, like all of these stunt double, like all of these things that the weirdo cards, but like they're weird in the best of ways. Like they read like normal until you start playing with them and you go, oh, no, everything makes a lot of sense here, because a lot of my deck building is based off of a lot of the theory that you have put forward for your deck, and just like the way I need to view CDH, I have to view it through your Kenrith angle, you know? Like how my pieces interact, where do they sit in the deck, how do they feel in the hand, you know, this idea of like no bad cards, sure, I guess, is like a thing now, but when we were in our heyday of brewing this, like that wasn't the conversation.
Yeah, I'd never heard the term
all.
NBC or no bad cards. They didn't
No,
exist 2 years ago.
No, they hardly existed a year and a half ago. Because you had this mantra of card quality up. Every card in your deck should feel good to cast at nearly every stage of the game, should be good to draw, and should be good to sit in the hand. And from that angle, you start to shed a lot of the chaff. You start to narrow in on a lot of different things. And I think that, again, I think we're starting to see this now, but it wasn't common thinking. Everyone was like, "Oh, this is like layered." Like, I still don't like that term, even though like it's like basically in every deck at this point, because it just means that the deck is just well constructed. All the pieces make sense. All the pieces have interplayability. Like even some of the stupid shit that this deck does, like Mox Diamond being the ignition piece for Kitten, like the concept of ignition pieces in this deck to begin with is just something that you don't see much often in Magic, and you definitely don't see often in CDH. Like this concept of, like, we're on Slaughter Pact, for example, as like a flex removal slot. This slot was Lightning Bolt, if I remember correctly, for a long time, because it was a finisher and it was a payoff, because we were looping Lotus Petal and Dark Ritual, or Lotus Petal and whatever else. But like these random ass 0 CMC cards that are just generically good to play, but through the lens of Kitten, through the lens of Eternal Witness, they become so much grander than the sum of our parts, and they are damn flexible too. Like, Mox Diamond's still Mox Diamond. It'll still put Dranith on the battlefield turn 1.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really big like piece of the deck. Like, we keep saying no bad cards, but that really was kind of the core igniter, is why are you playing Demonic Consultation? This card sucks. And I think the reason cutting it came up was because I was playing a game to practice for an event like at the beginning of the year a couple years ago, and it was I said, oh great, oh my god guys, I'm gonna win the game on turn 2 as long as I can cast Dockside Extortionist. But I didn't have a tutor for Dockside. You know what I did have? Demonic Consultation. Okay, great. I'm gonna consult for Dockside on end steps of turn 1 so that I can have turn 2 Dockside and win the game. And you wanna know what happened? Is Dockside was the bottom card of my library, and I said, wow, bad RNG. Also, I never want to cast this card again. And so I was complaining to one of my other friends, and she was telling me, like, just cut the card. The card is terrible. Play literally anything else. Another counterspell will serve you better. And so we tried it, and it felt really good. And so we started cutting out other cards that just generically were not great, like Skirk Prospector. That card is terrible. It doesn't combo with Dockside? Yes. Are there other cards that are just better that might cost 1 or 2 more mana to cast that also win the game with Dockside Extortionist for the same treasure count? Also, yes. Like, so just cut Skirk and play a better card. And I, ever since like that initial discussion, that has always been like the forefront of my mind. Does this card do anything? No. This card sucks if it's not winning you the game. We're not playing it. And I think that leads into a lot of the like weirdo picks, which I will continue to call them, because they are weirdo picks. They look like they look like casual cards. Picks. They're like, what is this doing in a CDH deck? You're not playing Thoracle, you're not playing Nas, you're not playing Breach. Like, what are you doing? And so people see you, like, you're like, oh, I'm gonna Worldly Tutor for Stunt Bubble on the end step, and like people who are playing this list for the first time go, what? Why? Like, what the hell is this card? I'm like, oh, it's just Power Crept Clone. It has Flash, which is exactly like it's not even. That's very much the same. That's not even underplaying. Like, it's not. That's exactly assessing what the card is. It is point for point Power Crept Clone. It is Clone plus Flash. It is blue and 3 generic for a 0/0 shapeshifter creature that enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature in play. Except it also has Flash. It's literally identical to Clone, except for the fact that it has the ability Flash. but that's really good for the whole draw go mantra. And that is really one of the things that I started focusing on as I started to like zone in and like fine tune the list was if creature cannot instant speed, creature cannot play. And for the most part, it's very true.
A lot of these creatures are flash or instant speed.
Yeah, there are very few creatures that are not instant speed. And the ones that are, I'd say it's about 50-50 at this point. And the ones that cannot be cast as though they have flash can always be cheated into play with Kenrith stability as though they do. Just requires a little bit of like forethought and setup, which I like to do. That's part of the planning in-game, like adaptation, flexing is part of what I enjoy about the format. And so this list really plays to that. So like I was saying, the half of the cards that you can't cast at instant speed have an immediate impact. Like they enter the battlefield and they do something. I think like probably the one exception to that is like you can say Dorkstone, but they guarantee you an extra land drop on the next turn. So I classify that as immediate impact. And then there are other reasons as well. But Esper Sentinel immediately starts drawing you cards or taxing your opponents. And I'd say legitimately the one card that does not have an immediate effect on the game, because it doesn't need to have like an immediate benefit to you, it just needs to have an immediate impact. And like Ranger Captain has an immediate impact. Like tutoring the one cost
it says you cannot sword.
It literally says Underworld Breach does not work while this card is in play. You cannot, if you cast a silence, I'm cracking this captain, and you cannot attempt to win unless you console over the top, which leaves it vulnerable. That thing, right? The only card that doesn't have that line of text, I would argue, is Lotho.
Yeah, I was gonna say Lotho's probably the lowest impact card, but it still generates
so good.
mana.
It's like baby smothering Tithe. It's a creature. It's legendary, so it feeds your Otawara account. It turns on your Beseiju for a green. Just things like that. And sometimes it does have an immediate impact because you go Lotho, first spell, second spell, cast a Dwarf, or second spell, cast a Lotus Petal, or something like that. And so it immediately pays you back a mana. And then like the fact that this card doesn't have an immediate impact is okay, because once it does start having an impact, the impact is so disproportionate for what you invested into the card. That's acceptable. It is an acceptable change. Also, it's a 2 mana card that is a creature, which impacts evolution and neoform, which we can talk about later.
Definitely got to talk about neoform and evolution.
Yeah, but for the most part, all the creatures like have an immediate impact on the game. Even Niv Mizzet, which might not draw you cards away, or Talion, which might not draw you cards away, right away, cause your opponents to start thinking, well, now I have to decide if casting this spell is worth it. If I cast an instant, or if I cast a creature and don't pay for like a Rhystic Study that I control, what is going to get shot? Is it worth it to me to let that thing get shot? Is it worth it to me to lose 2 life to cast this Talisman? I guess the one other thing, ironically, is Displacer Kitten. That card by itself has no impact on the board as soon as it comes down. Now that's
it has impact. As someone who has seen you go Displacer Kitten past, that card has impact.
Yeah, but like it has impact on player mentalities. It doesn't have impact on the board.
Yeah.
And I think that anyone who understands what Displacer Kitten does, like in any context, even like the most basic like 3 fairy context, they understand that the card is powerful and that it does combo with a variety of things. Even if it doesn't go infinite with a variety of things, the synergies are really strong, and so it's scary, right? Even if it is just Displacer Kitten pass, any ETB, now my opponents obviously want to remove it, but at the same time, casting an instant invites a counterspell, which procs the kitten, which in and of itself can be really scary. Like if there's a Dockside in play and the count is really high, like that in and of itself, they're like, oh well, I really want a swords like the Dockside or the kitten, but if they have a mental misstep or literally any counterspell, they can cast the counterspell and they can. I'm gonna go back to this idea of 1-for-1ing. They can 2-for-1 me because I cast swords, my opponent casts swords. I cast mental misstep on the swords, which is going to counter the sword. So say it's swords targeting Dockside, right? I'm going to cast swords targeting Dockside, and then I'm going to flicker Dockside as well, so double protect it. Or if they want to remove Kitten, because that's the combo piece, like it's the high synergy piece, it's the scary piece, I can mental misstep that, and then I can get a trigger, flicker the Dockside, and now I've made 6 mana. So now I can interact even further. So it gets really, interacting gets really tricky, and especially for those who are not familiar with how Displace Your Kitten stacks resolve, it is very, very easy to interact in the wrong place, like too early or too late. Sometimes you let a trigger resolve that you shouldn't have let resolve, or sometimes you don't let a trigger resolve and you try and interact earlier by like you sword something and it's all a bait, so you can actually resolve this abrupt decay on like the Dockside. But now I've resolved like this flicker on the Kitten to save it, and like now I'm gonna cast a different spell to flicker the Dockside as well, and I've eaten 2 of your spells and still made mana. It's just, there's a whole,
Like you just go insane.
It just starts.
You literally just go insane.
It just starts becoming like mind games to some extent. And for those who have listened to our politics episode, like that's something that another aspect of the game that I really enjoy is like the mental chess aspect, where you're moving here and I'm moving there, and you think that you're winning, but it's actually like a trap, and like, yeah. So the player psychology plays a big part in that as well, which is something that I have outside game experience with, is like psychological studies, and so I get to use that knowledge as well, and it makes it really interesting.
I remember playing Eternal Witness. The idea behind it being like you were just gonna run out these creatures that are just generically powerful that your opponent isn't gonna know is gonna kill them in the end. Like you will just play an Eternal Witness, you'll pick up a land, and then eventually down the line, because no one's gonna deal with the Eternal Witness, or you're gonna have a Kenrith resolved and have 1,000,000 mana, because you've docksided or you've made every land drop every single turn and the game has gone long, that you are just going to Kenrith, reanimate the Eternal Witness, and then find your way to Displace Your Kitten, and then from there, that Eternal Witness is going to kill you. I remember like talking through that theory and being like, this is the superpower of the deck. Every single piece you run out is going to kill you in some capacity. Every single card that your opponent is going to see is attacking on at least 2 axes. If not more potentially, if we want to factor in like the mental and the politics aspect. Like the amount of daggers that you are attacking and pointing at your opponent at every step of the game, it's overwhelming. It's insanely overwhelming. And as someone who has run a lot of matches against this list, shit, man, I don't even know how to fight this list properly.
Even when you know what it's doing, you don't know what it's doing.
Like, I know exactly every move that this deck is gonna play and every move this deck is gonna do, but like, you run every solid value engine in the game. Like, you have 5 colors, you have every counter spell, you have every tutor, every good piece of interaction, every good, you're playing the soup, you're playing the pile, but it's so much more than the sum of its parts. Like, I look at this and I see there is decision making, there is symphony, there is energy, but like I will pull up, you know what, let's hold on, let's get a live reaction. Let's pull up the Blue Farm primer, because I genuinely have not looked at this in a minute.
Well, while you're doing that, I will comment, but that is going back to like the comparison of extracting control from a 60 card format. That is
exactly, yep,
what makes the deck viable as a Drago control list. Is the deck doesn't 1v1ing doesn't work. So because of that, you have to make, not in Commander. So because of that, you have to make your plays at the very least 2-for-1s, and that is something the list does. It turns every win condition is also something that will push your advantage or hurt your opponents. Every stacks piece can also be a win condition. Like there are so many different like ways to like tweak and twist and like board states you can force into existence that will push you ahead. Because every resource you expend, as long as you're utilizing them correctly and you're properly assessing the board, every resource you expend is going to get you back at least 1 resource, which means that you're always 2-for-1ing at worst.
Yeah, going, man, I just glaze over when I look at this list. Like it is 4 color good stuff. Actually, hold on, let's make it fair. Let's look at we mentioned Agila, no bad cards. Let's look at this real quick. Like,
I think,
Agila,
are you looking to like compare cards between lists?
I just want like my gut reaction, you know. That's all I'm looking for
I feel like
here.
Dawn Waker might be a more apt comparison.
Dawnwaker might actually be the most apt
I
comparison.
think Dawnwaker is probably the next closest thing to like just multicolor Drago control, where they're trying to stick a Thrasios, which is a value engine in the command zone, and then they're just riding Thrasios activations to Dockside Emil.
Yeah.
Or Derevi, Emil Cradle, and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's the fact that I'm so invested in this list just personally, and I like seeing this list do its thing so much that I'm just like, I can't see the forest for the trees, but like this is just exciting to me. Like there are so many cool cards here. Like you're not playing the expected things, and that's as anyone who has listened to the show knows that I cherish the unique individuality that this format can bring. And I think this is a great example of it. Okay. Enough about us gushing. Are you ready to move into like the pseudo card?
Let's do the pseudo card by card. It's still gonna be more theory, but because all the cards
still gonna be
are gonna be self-explanatory, except for the ones that aren't. So we're mostly gonna focus on this.
Yeah. So as for the dork lineup, I'd say this is pretty standard in a post-Bowmasters format. We have, birds, Deathrite, that makes sense. Ignoble Hierarch and Noble Hierarch, these color shift us, and they also make our beat sticks bigger. Self-explanatory. The weirdo out of the bunch for our dork lineup, I would say, is the Bloom Tender.
Bloom Tender's really good, though. Like, it's
insane.
You're in 5 color. You're playing permanents with all 5 color pips. Like, you're going to, at worst, be tapping for probably 3 to 4 mana with this card, which after you activate it once, is going to be neutral on mana. It'll have paid back by 1. And then anytime you tap it for 3 or 4, or even 2 after that, it's just paying you so many dividends. Plus, there are some combo lines with it. It turns into like a secondary copy of Dockside Extortionist in a couple of lines. So
it does weirdo things. As someone whose primary deck is seeking to abuse the untapping of big dorks, Bloom Tender is fantastic. How much do you think you need to talk about Gilded Drake? Because like it's one of those. It's a good card, but there's an asterisk, I feel like, next to Gilded Drake in this list specifically.
I can sum up Gilded Drake in 4 words and then 1 sentence, and that is Gilded Drake good, very good. And then the sentence is read the primer. There's too much to cover with Gilded Drake for the sake of this specific episode. I've talked with my friend Jordan Garcia about it at length, and he has best summarized Gilded Drake, and he's put the deck in simple terms of it's Gilded Drake control, which to some extent is true, especially in a non-turbo meta. And even in a turbo meta sometimes, where someone's just really hinging on like one specific creature to get them there, like maybe it's Turbo Najeela, or maybe it's Turbo like Blue Farm that's skewed towards the faster end, and they try to resolve a Tymna or something to get back in, and you eat that with your Gilded Drake.
They're just out of the game.
Yeah, and they're just out of the game, and you have an advantage engine. So it really does boil down to Gilded Drake good, very good. Read the primer.
Very good. Yeah. I say for that one, refer to the primer. It's insane. I don't fear Dockside when you go like Finale X2. I fear Gilded Drake, and I fear that you're just gonna take the best thing on my board, and I can't do a damn thing about it. Just cannot do a damn thing about it. Again, like breezing through a lot of this, like GA, Lotho, Bowmasters. I guess Fimage gets special note because it is a Kenrith piece.
Specifically in Kenrith, Phantasmal Image becomes a combo piece, which most of the time it is not. Mostly because you can't target it. In Kenrith, that becomes a boon because it has both an ability that can target Phantasmal Image as well as an ability that can reanimate Phantasmal Image. Therefore, if there's any Dockside Extortionist in play at all, yours, your opponent's, a copy of somebody's, from somewhere else, it doesn't matter. Phantasmal Image can enter the battlefield as a copy of Dockside, and as long as the trigger makes a treasure count of at least 8, that gives you enough to use Kenrith's 2 ability, which is his green ability, to target the Phantasmal Image, forcing the sacrifice trigger, sending it to the graveyard, and then use his 5 ability, which is his black ability, to reanimate the Phantasmal Image, and that means you've spent 7 mana to kill and then bring back your Phantasmal Image, which leaves you with 1 treasure. That image will now enter the battlefield as a copy of Dockside again, which will make you 8 more treasures, sending you to 9. And you see now that at least if the count is 8 or higher for Dockside, Fimage and Kenrith will win you the game by netting 1 treasure every time.
Instant speed, by the
It
way.
is very, very instant speed. It is also the primary Dockside combo in the list at this point.
And just through your testing, we've just discovered that there's really no other reason to be on like another one of those. Like it's just enough.
In my list specifically, no. There are a lot of other Kenrith lists that are way more Dockside focused. You'll hear a lot of Kenrith players say that the deck is just like it's Dockside combo, which is very true. But I feel like a lot of decks are Dockside combo.
When it's the Dockside, one of the best cards of the game, why would you not build your deck around it?
It's just that Dockside and Kenrith has an extra special place because there are a lot of cards that kill Dockside, and as long as you're making 5 or 6 mana, Kenrith brings it back.
You're so fine with it. You're so fine with it.
So there are a lot of extra combos that Kenrith can do. From my testing, a lot of those we'll call them Dockside bottoms. They are pretty inefficient from a control perspective because they don't do a lot other than abuse Dockside Extortionist. And like we said, the whole thing about the list is we want to be 2 for 1 with every single play. Phantasmal Image is great for that because I'm casting Fimage, copying maybe not a Dockside Extortionist, maybe I'm copying a Bloom Tender, maybe I'm copying somebody's Imperial Recruiter, maybe I'm copying like a Tivit or something. It doesn't really matter.
Any decent, the best creature on the battlefield, you know.
And then once someone resolves a Dockside Extortionist, I get to just pop off because I can kill it and reanimate it at will at instant speed. It's super efficient. It plays into the whole flash thing. I was playing Mayhem Devil as an additional Dockside bottom right up until about 4 weeks ago. But at that point in time, I wanted to add some other cards, and Mayhem Devil was the weakest one because it was a pseudo stacks piece, but it wasn't really staxing anything important enough, in my opinion. It wasn't stopping any major combos. It wasn't doing anything important enough, and it required a treasure count of 5, which other loops do as well, even if they're not 2-card combos, 3-card if you count Kenrith, but he's in the command zone. And it's a lot of people know that loop at this point, so it doesn't catch people by surprise, which the Fimage loop still does, which baffles me. But that said, it's not anywhere close to as instant speed because you can't play out Mayhem Devil for value as easily. People will get mad that it's there because they're like, I'm gonna crack my treasures, he's gonna shoot my dork, so they'll kill it early just because it's frustrating to them. Whereas with Fimage, it can be a dork, it can be a Timna, it can be whatever you need it to be at that time, and there are no matchups it's bad in as long as there's any creature in play. It can be your own creature.
Which, when we play a game called Commander, where everyone has access to a creature that will be cast realistically at some point, there will be a creature.
Absolutely. So it's one of those things where the card's just not bad.
Yeah. I mean, Endurance, good card. Dual Caster, good card. Ron's on half the combos there. Manglehorn was the swap in for Mayhem Devil, and we've kind of touched on this in the past. I think it's better.
It's a much better stacks piece. It has an ETB that's immutable. It's green, so it pitches to Endurance, which Mayhem Devil pitches to neither my forces or my Endurance. So pitch casting does nothing. It was the Thoracle thing all over again. I had used Mayhem Devil for something other than a pitch to Chrome Mox in not the past 3 months, and I said, "You gotta go."
Yep, gotta get out of here. Ranger Captain, Spellseeker, good cards. Displacerkin, we've talked about. Stunt Double, we've talked about. Talion, it says draw a card several times when your opponents play the game. We play that. Niv Mizzet, we have touched on. This is your Neoform off Kenrith target.
Yeah, a lot of lists, like I said, they call it Dockside Tribal. A lot of lists will play like Deadeye Navigator or Consecrated Sphinx. Some of the Evo lists, which consider themselves faster and more flexible, will play like Burning Root Demon. I think that card's ass. It's basically baby intuition because it entombs 1 card and puts 1 card into your hand. It's an opponent's choice. It does it on ETB. It's a 6-mana card. I also think that card just sucks. My opinion. It could change in the future, obviously, but from everything I have seen, and I've tested with it a little bit, I did not enjoy the card. I did not think it was
I just don't know what it
very
does.
efficient.
Like I understand what what the card text and like resolving it
If
does,
you're
but like I
on
don't
breach,
know what it
it's
does.
supposed to be able to turn your Kenrith into the breach combo.
Oh, okay, because you just get breach Cedh's wreck.
I believe the thought process was get breach and ephemerate, and then if they give you
Our best friend.
yeah, if they give you ephemerate, then you can flicker the demon, go get Cedh's wreck and LED, and then you've assembled the intuition.
Gotcha. Okay, it seems like ass.
It's
moving
yeah,
on.
I don't think it's very good.
Yeah, it's ass. All right. Sorceries again. Like these are all just good cards. Reanimate, Detutor, Finale, Neoform, Eldritch, Cedh. If you're in these colors, you have to give me a strong reason not to play any of these.
Yeah, they're like just the best cards for what they do. The only weird one is Cedh's Reclamation. Some people ask me, why are you playing Cedh's Rec? You're not on Underworld Breach. And the answer is, like you said...
Sometimes it gets a fetch land,
sometimes,
man.
like you said, the card is just really good. And it gets turn... One of my favorite play patterns is turn 1, fetch Crypt, get a white source, wreck my fetch land, get my land back, and I have 4 mana on turn 2. And 2 of its lands.
I have done this. I have seen the light. This shit's legit.
It's people. One of my other friends, Max. He a long time ago when I was first teaching him how to play Magic, let alone CEDH. We were talking about cards, and he was like, "Oh yeah, fast mana is really good." And then we would play games where Collector Oof would just land, and he would. And eventually he was like, "Yeah, Collector is really good, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I think the best ramp in the game is just hitting your land drop every turn." And I think I have come to see that as so correct.
No one's attacking land bases because it's really inefficient to do so, and very, very swingy and kingmaky. So, like, it's so much better to just not trouble yourself with playing like Blood Moon.
You'll see back to basics in like mono blue.
Because like they're playing mono blue, like that's part of what it is.
The game most of the time, and you'll see Magus of the Moon more than Blood Moon, but you'll see that in like a handful of like 2-color stack.
Yeah,
but that's it.
Yeah, or like
they're really rare.
Magdas. Yeah. It's not frequent enough. It's not.
And Moon's really easy to play around now because Dockside exists.
Dockside Extortionist says cool Blood Moon.
Rocks exist.
Like it's not.
Moon is nowhere near as punishing as it used to be.
Yeah. No, Cedh's Rec is nuts, even when we aren't doing like the intuition piles with it, which we'll touch on intuition. All right, swiping on through to the instant again. Like all of these are just like good cards. Like there are 2 cards in our 1-drop suite that I would say are weirdo, but even out of those 2, it's literally only one. Like it's Noxious Survival and Cloud Shift. Noxious Survival,
weird. That's a staple at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's why I was like you could squint at them and call them weird, but they're not. Like Noxious Survival isn't that weird, but
Cloud Shift has been like the poster child of this.
Oh yeah, people still are like, why do you run this card? And I'm just like, card's better than Ephemerate, and they tell me it's not, and then I proceed to use it and abuse the crap out of Gilded Drake, and I'm undrakeable, and like it just makes people like question their reality when they see what Cloud Shift can do, and I love that. It's also really funny because ever since I've started playing this card and I've started like doing okay with this deck, with Cloud Shift in it, it took a while, but I have caught other people have caught on to Ephemerate, not Ephemerate, sorry, that's a trash card. To Cloud Shift and the tech, like much more quickly than I would have expected. There's one of the best Kenrith players that I've ever seen. He plays a much faster, more aggressive version of the list, but he goes by the username PTD. And him and I ran in the same spheres, and we shared a lot of Kenrith tech. He was the one who had me on Mayhem Devil for a long time, because it's a really good card, don't get me wrong. It just wasn't working for what I needed for that slot right now. But I tried to get him onto Dualcaster Mage and Cloud Shift, and he tried out both, didn't care for DCM as much, but he does have Cloud Shift in his deck, and the tech has stuck with him. There are some other players in the Pacific Northwest playing other decks, like not even Kenrith decks, that have picked up Cloud Shift, and the card is just really, really good. You can reanimate someone's dockside from their yard and then flicker it to your side of the field or anything else. Like, such a flexible card, so good. I truly do think that the card is. I can't say it's strictly better than Veil of Summer because they do have different roles, but I do think that it is better than the way most people play Veil of Summer most of the time. Is it a pseudo silence?
Yep.
Veil is a pseudo silence, sure, but most of the time that I see people cast Veil is, oh shit, I'm about to get draked, or someone's trying to bounce my thing that I need. I'm gonna Veil to protect it.
Or the classic cycle it for green.
Yeah, or cycle it for green, which that is one thing that it does have on Cloud Shift. Cloud Shift doesn't say draw a card, but Cloud Shift also protects you from every removal spell, every removal effect that's not a sweeper, whereas Veil only protects you from blue and black effects.
Yeah, no, it's legit. So much so that it's literally the next card I'm trying to cram into my list because I need that effect in there very, very badly.
We also skimmed over...
it's insane. No, I really didn't have much to say.
I was gonna say we also skimmed over Slaughter Pact, which
we kind of covered it.
But,
we didn't
cover the important part about this card.
We didn't cover the important tech.
That's true. So this card it's a little bit of a weirdo one, like we said earlier. It's a really good removal spell. Some people say, why aren't you on Deadly Rollick? It's also a free spell, and it exiles instead of kill. Well, let me tell you something. Deadly Rollick requires me to have my 5-mana commander in play. And as a control deck, sometimes I get to 5 mana and I pass the turn 6 times in a row because I can't afford to tap out for 5 mana and cast my commander. I need to be countering other people's game actions and developing other resources on the board. That said, the one other thing that Slaughter Pact does have over Deadly Rollick is that while it doesn't answer the black creatures I care about, which is sometimes Opposition Agent, sometimes Talion, but mostly Dothy Voidwalker is the one that I think really, really sucks. It does kill Elishnorn, Mother of Machines, which is a card that my deck needs to answer, because the deck literally cannot win through an Elishnorn or a Torpor Orb effect. That's the one weakness of the deck. That said, that weakness has been acknowledged, and there are so many ways in this list to deal with that problem, because the only Torpor Orb and Mother are the only 2 effects of that style that see play, at least to any major degree. And it answers. It answers them. Elishnorn specifically is the biggest one because I can Besage you a Torpor Orb. I have lots of ways of dealing with a Torpor Orb. I can Abrupt Decay it, can't Abrupt Decay a Mother. So, but Slaughter Pact is just another spell that does that. That said, the really, really spicy tech about this is that if you get your favorite kitty cat into play, this card becomes a second copy of Cloud Shift, more or less. It's pseudo Cloud Shift, but it's also free, because none of the creatures that we care to target with this card are going to be black, at least not that we control. The only one might be Talion, if we needed to kill it to allow somebody else to cast a spell for some reason, but that seems very, very niche. The main thing this card allows you to do is target a creature for removal, and then flicker it with your Displacer Kitten, right? So Displacer Kitten achieves that flicker effect that Cloud Shift would give you. And the really, really sneaky thing about this card is that you can, as long as your creature isn't black, which I hinted at this earlier, I mentioned the creatures we care to target with this spell, which are most of the time ours, will target a Spellseeker or an Eternal Witness with Slaughter Pact for 0 mana, and it says, cycle this card, flicker a non-black creature you control, because you can, you cast the Slaughter Pact, target the creature. This triggers Displacer Kitten. The Displacer Kitten trigger always resolves before the spell cast, which is it's a benefit to the deck and also a hindrance at times. But in this case, it's a major boon, because the flicker, if we're targeting our Spellseeker, resolves, flickering our Spellseeker, causing it to ETB, give us a trigger to tutor for another card, and then the Slaughter Pact itself has no legal target, because the object that it was targeting has left the battlefield. This is a new Spellseeker, which means the spell is going to fizzle, and you don't have to pay your pack trigger at the beginning of the next turn, which is really cool. There's a lot of different things you can do with this. There are actually several win the game lines that use this effect, and they're instant speed. So we won't cover all of them. I can't reveal all my secrets on the air, but it is another combo card similar to Cloud Shift.
Yeah, it's I mentioned this previously, but Lightning Bolt came out for this, and I was personally Lightning Bolt's biggest defender. I love Lightning Bolt.
Card is very good.
Sick, very
Kills
sick
bird.
card. Kills bird, kills Douthie, clears up a lot of like weirdo stuff that we care about at the lower CMCs. They're just a little too weird to get rid of, and efficiently too. And then you literally killed me with the Slaughter Pack loop. And I went, yep, never mind. This just does what you're looking for with Lightning Bolt, just better. And it technically kills more things, and it's also free.
Yes, it is also free, which is so good.
Yeah, yep. All right, stepping up into the 2s. Again, all of these are just good cards. Like, yeah, I mean, we're still playing the Tainted Pact because this card says instant speed, get the best top deck in your, get your best top deck.
Yep.
That's all it does. Or find something specific if you want to get something specific.
I've set up a lot of board states that don't do anything. And like on my turn, I don't have a card to combo with, and then somebody puts something on the stack, casts a card, or just XYZ. Maybe there's an op in play, and I really need an answer to something. And Tainted Pact is a tutor, just like Lindell's Vault, that goes through op agent. It's an instant speed card. It's easy to cast. It's a non-creature spell. It's cheap. And it puts it into hand. So similar to like how I think Eladamri's Call is a better card than Worldly Tutor, even though it costs 1 more mana. Tainted Pact is the same thing. It puts any card into my hand, which can be an instant, can be a creature, whatever. It enables a lot of instant speed win lines.
Yeah, no, it's very good, very flexible card. We like it here. Yeah, I mean, nothing really to speak about. All these cards in the 2s are just good.
Ward, Force, Intuition. There are no true piles for Intuition. That's worth noting.
No. True skill intuition gamer.
Yeah. Best thing you got as far as like making a quote unquote true pile is pitching a Sabine's Wreck as one of the cards. But even then, unless you have like at least one, it'll be a 4-card pile because you need to have one other card either in your hand, in your graveyard, or on the field, and it'll take additional mana to get it there. So it is. Don't think that it's a cast Intuition, resolve Intuition, win the game type of deck. Like this is not Blue Farm. We're not playing Intuition Breach, and that's something to note about the deck is like it can be really political because you can like people will say, oh shit, he's intuitioning, well you gotta counter this, and you'll be like, all right, you're worried about me winning the game on this off this intuition? They'll be like, yeah, and you can say, all right, this intuition is not winning the game. I'm getting XYZ card, and I'm gonna ask, and I'll even target you with it, because it answers this other player and what you don't like about what they're doing. And then you get to entomb 2 cards as well, because that's just really strong in the deck. One can even be Sabine's Reclamation. Sometimes entombing Sabine's Reclamation and like Gaia's Cradle while getting a Force of Will is just the best play that can be made.
Oh, nutty. Yeah, no, it's true skill intuition. It's give me the exact answer we need for this situation. Also, I'm studying my graveyard. Teehee.
Yep. Yeah.
Whoops. Sorry. Did I just create an insanely favorable game state in a moment where I need to be the one to fix this? I sure did. Welcome to the game, fucker.
Yep, pretty much.
Mind Break Trap, Force of Will. We're playing blue. We play these
Saw
cards.
in half.
They're good. Saw in half. We're playing.
Notably, this passed the Saw in half smell test. Nearly every single creature in our mana base, yeah, mana base. Every single creature in our lineup, save for our legendaries in Lotho, Talion, and Niv, are fine to be doubled or actively win us the game if they are doubled. Spellseeker, Ewit, Dockside, like that's enough of a reason for me to be able to like Saw in half here.
Actually, 2 or 3 different combos that go infinite with Saw in half that don't involve Dualcaster Mage. So that's pretty cool. There's also I'll note that something I've done repeated several times in the past with Niv Mizzet, haven't had the chance or the need to do it with Talion before, but it protects Niv Mizzet. Because even though he gets smaller, he doesn't die. So at that critical juncture where someone's going to be resolving an exile effect on Niv, swords the Niv, draw a card, resolve the swords, or resolve the, not swords, saw the Niv, resolve the trigger, draw a card, resolve the saw, kill Niv Mizzet, make a smaller Niv Mizzet, but the important effect of the card, which is the drawing cards dealing damage, still exists, so it requires another removal spell. Talion similarly it could be done to that in theory, because you could reset the number if someone's popping off of a storm effect. You could do that to reset the number.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, it's just have you noticed the theme with this list? It's flexible, powerful, and wins the game, all in one card slot. Moving on to the artifacts, these are just the best rocks you can play.
Yep.
Just
Chrome
straight up.
Mox, Petal, Mana Crypt, Mox Diamond, Mana Vault, Soul Ring. We're not on Jeweled Lotus or Grim Monolith anymore, just because those cards, while they do ramp us into Kenrith, the deck is fairly pip intensive, so the extra acceleration doesn't do a whole lot in terms of like anything other than maybe getting out a creature 1 or 2 turns faster, which we're a control list. We can generally afford to save mana into the later turns to develop something like that. We'll just put out a Stax piece or hold up a counterspell in the meanwhile.
Yep. Then obviously, our favorite card in the game, the One Ring, has its appearance
Draw
here.
engines are good.
Draw engines are very, very good, and this is the best draw engine in the game next to Rhystic Study. Speaking of the enchantments, we're on 5 of them. 4 of which I would say are staples. Shout outs to Survival. I love me a Survival. I love Toolbox in the Grave and my deck at the same time. Love that. Fish, Rhystic, obviously we're in blue. These are the like auto includes of auto includes. Talk to me about Necromancy. So that's a bit of a weirder one.
Yeah, so Necromancy is another effect that reanimates because we have a little bit of a reanimator sub-theme. We also just like pulling valuable creatures out of the graveyard, ours or somebody else's. The slot used to be Animate Dead back when I was playing Lurrus, but as I moved away from trying to win at sorcery speed and developing a more flexible playstyle, Necromancy came up as an option that, while Lurrus can't flash it back, it itself has flash. Necromancy is an enchantment that can be cast at instant speed, and if you do cast it at instant speed, it sacrifices at the end of turn. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with this card. You can flicker it to ignore the sacrifice effect with Displacer Kitten. You can take someone else's card in response to their own reanimation, and people will like frequently let it resolve because even though it's really good for you, it's way better for the other person. Plus, it'll get sacrificed. Oh, yeah. Like, there are a bunch of sweet things about this card. And then there's one really, really cool effect that I'm going to keep a secret. But if you read the Gatherer rulings and you do a little bit of research into the rules, I'm sure you can figure it out.
It's tech. It is absolutely tech. No, it's really good. I think for the most part, like, I've moved away from like Reanimate and Animate Dead being like my reanimation core. I'm much like, I will gladly play the 1 extra mana for Necromancy to be able to do the same thing at instant speed.
Yeah, and it's generic mana. If it was like 2 black pipped and 1, I probably would not be playing it. Yeah. It would be a little too clunky. But the fact that like a Mana Crypt and a Swamp turns this on like super easily, or like even a Mana Vault, even though you have 1 extra floating, it's just like there are a lot of ways to hold up multiple options and multiple outs and through the entire turn rotation until you need them, and then it pivots into this. Like, you can hold up Mana Vault and black-blue source for a Kenrith activation to kill a Thoracling player, or to draw a card after like Worldly Tutor or something in response, or you could Necromancy. Like, it's just a lot of different.
The toolbox is wide
options,
open.
Yeah.
And then Touch the Spirit Realm. I don't know if anything needs to be said about here. Cards, one of the best removal spells in the format, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep, it's fantastic. One of the coolest things about this card, I think, is that it has a CMC of 3. So something I have done more than once, and I think is a super valuable play, is channeling Touch the Spirit Realm to hit something that you want gone. Goes to the graveyard as a discard effect, and then you can flashback Sabine's Reclamation to put the touch back into play and permanently exiles.
Yep. That's tech, baby. Love that. All right. And that deals with all of our non-lands. Mana base is pretty standard.
Yeah, there's nothing special about it.
All the fetches, all the duels except for Plateau. Get that shit out of here.
9 fetches, 9 duels.
We're on Viseju, we're on Odawara, we're on Gaia's Cradle, we're on every five color land, including an Orchard and Tarnished Citadel. Like, it's nothing spicy.
Orchard's cool. It's anti-Tymna tech.
Yep. It's
the mana base is arguably the least sexy part about this deck, but even then, it still it does what it needs to do.
It gets you where you need to go.
Exactly. We don't really need to mess with anything crazy beyond that. Like it does
exactly what it needs to do. When every other non-land card in our deck does so much, the mana base can take a break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I still am in love with this deck. This deck's just insane. It's not to my play style. It's not to my playstyle personally, but I respect everything that this deck stands for and what it does personally.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of interesting play patterns that have become really standard for me. It's also still like so flexible and a lot of like unique cards and effects therein that mean that I'm constantly amazed by like the different options I'm provided by the cards in my hand and the cards on an entire table. I think a lot of times one of the deck's strengths is because there's a lot of control effects and reanimations and ways to duplicate and punish other people's cards. Like a lot of times the deck just aims to play other people's decks. Not even like through politics or something like that, but just aims to play the cards that other people are playing because they are casting them or they're in the deck, and it wants to abuse that. Because my deck has a way to do whatever your deck is doing with it to a similar degree.
And to a similar degree, in addition to the overall game plan of, I'm going to outvalue the shit out of you.
Yeah. Yes.
Like you're just gonna pull ahead in so many different scenarios and just be better prepared for all of the weird, wacky shenanigans that this format brings.
That's what we aim to do. That's what we aim to do.
That is what we aim to do. Well,
what I aim to do here, Atlas, is see if you have any closing remarks on the decks, anything that we missed, anything we need to talk about. I feel like we kind of covered everything that we really need to cover here.
I honestly have a lot more that I could say about it, just because the theory behind a lot of my selections and like the different play patterns are really intricate. A lot of them are super specific, but we don't have time for that here. So I will say there's a primer for the list on my personal Mox field. The list will be linked just like all of our other local brews from our page, so you'll be able to go see it and read the primer if you're interested, and then give me some feedback. Drop a like if you want to, but like give it some feedback. Tell me why you think a card that I'm playing isn't good, or if you think there's a better option. I'm always looking for other ways to like improve the deck or tweak it. So maybe there's a super weird card that you think has potential. I'd love to hear about it. That's the kind of thing that I'm looking to abuse. Just don't tell me to play Thoracle or Emil or some of the other stuff, because man, I hate those cards.
Hey, have you heard of Wheel of Fortune?
Oh yeah, Wheel of Fortune's such a good card.
Yep. No, I think that's gonna just about wrap us up here at Mana on the Rocks. Another successful local brew down, a historic one, as far as I'm concerned, because we have now covered both of our quote unquote signature decks as they are. Although I think I've moved on from Chainer and have developed a different personality at this point. But that's for a later time.
Atlas, always a pleasure. Glad we got to do this one. I love talking the
Kenrith theory, because this deck is just mad interesting.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be able to share some of the ideas behind my list.
Absolutely.
To our listeners, thank you very much for listening. Catch you next time.